Have you ever wondered something that quietly shakes the foundation of everything you believe about yourself? What if the center of your life, the one you defend, improve, worry about, and protect, was never truly there? What if the voice that constantly says, I, the one that claims ownership of your memories, your fears, your achievements, your failures, was only an appearance in consciousness? And here is the most unsettling question of all. If the ego never truly existed, who has been living your life all this time? This question lies at the heart of one of the most radical revelations ever spoken by the great sage Ramana Maharshi. His teaching did not merely challenge religious beliefs or philosophical ideas. It challenged the very assumption that there is a separate individual at the center of experience. Many seekers came to Maharshi with the same concern that has troubled humanity for centuries. They believed the ego was the root of suffering and therefore must be destroyed. One such seeker approached Maharshi and asked him with great sincerity, Master, how can the ego be destroyed? At first glance, it seems like a perfectly logical question. Almost every spiritual tradition speaks about overcoming the ego, transcending the ego, conquering the ego. The ego is often portrayed as the enemy within, something that must be battled and defeated. But Maharshi gave a response so simple and so profound that it completely overturns the entire approach. Instead of explaining how to destroy the ego, he quietly said, first find out if the ego truly exists. Just reflect on the depth of that statement. Maharshi was not telling the seeker to fight the ego or suppress it. He was pointing towards something far more direct, investigation. His insight was that the ego is not a real entity that hides somewhere inside us. It is not a solid structure that must be dismantled piece by piece. It is merely a thought, the thought I. And yet this single thought has created the entire sense of being a separate person. The seeker, understandably puzzled, asked another question. But Master, he said, the ego feels extremely real. I clearly experience myself as a person. I feel pain, I feel pride, I feel fear. How can something that feels so real not actually exist? Maharshi listened quietly and then explained using an analogy that has become famous in his teachings. He said the ego is like mistaking a rope for a snake in dim light. Imagine walking into a dark room and suddenly seeing something long and curved lying on the floor. Because the light is faint, the mind interprets the shape as a snake. Instantly fear arises. The heart begins to race, the body becomes tense, and the imagination starts projecting danger. But when a lamp is brought into the room, the truth becomes obvious. The snake was never there. It was only a rope all along. The fear was real, the reaction was real, but the snake itself had no existence whatsoever. Maharshi explained that the ego functions in exactly the same way. It appears real only because it has never been examined closely. The moment it is investigated with clear awareness, it dissolves like the snake that vanishes when the rope is seen clearly. Notice the beauty of this insight. You do not need to kill the snake. You do not need to battle it or defeat it. The illusion disappears the moment the truth is seen. This is why Maharshi emphasized the method of self-inquiry. Instead of trying to eliminate thoughts or control the mind, he encouraged seekers to ask a single question with complete sincerity. Who am I? The seeker then asked Maharshi something that many of us might also ask. When I look inside and ask who I am, he said, I find only thoughts, memories, sensations, and feelings. The ego still seems to be there. What should I do then? Maharshi replied with great subtlety. He said the ego survives because we never question the one who claims ownership of experience. Let us observe how the ego operates in daily life. A thought appears saying, I am angry. Another thought appears saying, I am successful. Another says, I am spiritual, or I am a failure. Each of these statements begins with the word I. But who exactly is this I? Where is it located? If we say the ego is the body is constantly changing. The body you had as a child is completely different from the body you have now. Cells die and are replaced continuously. Yet despite these changes, something remains constant enough for you to say, this is still me. If we say the ego is the mind is even more unstable. Thoughts appear and disappear endlessly. Emotions rise and fall like waves on the ocean. If the mind is constantly changing, how can it serve as a permanent identity? Maharshi invited seekers to observe this carefully. Each time the thought, I, appears, instead of following the story that comes after it, simply turn attention toward the source of that I. Ask sincerely, who is the one that this thought refers to? At first, the mind will try to answer conceptually. It may say, I am this person with this history. But that answer is merely another thought. It may say, I am the body. But that again is only an idea. The deeper the inquiry becomes, the more something extraordinary begins to happen. The mind slowly realizes that it cannot locate the ego anywhere. It is like chasing a shadow. From a distance, a shadow appears to have shape and substance. But the closer you approach it, the more it dissolves into nothing. A seeker once asked Maharshi another profound question. If the ego is only a thought, he said, why does the world appear so real? Why does suffering feel so intense? Maharshi explained that the ego is the first thought, the root thought. From this initial assumption, I am the body, all other thoughts arise. Once this assumption is accepted, the entire network of desires, fears, attachments, and conflicts begins to unfold. But if the first thought is examined carefully, the entire structure loses its foundation. This is why Maharshi insisted that liberation is not about acquiring a new state or achieving a mystical experience. It is about recognizing what has always been true. The ego is like a character in a dream. While the dream is happening, the character feels completely real and independent. But when the dreamer wakes up, it becomes obvious that the character never had an existence separate from the dreamer. In the same way, Maharshi pointed out that awareness itself is the true reality. Awareness is present before the thought, I, arises. It is present before any perception, before any emotion, before any idea about who you are. Thoughts appear within awareness and then disappear again, just as clouds appear in the sky and eventually dissolve. When self-inquiry becomes deep and sincere, attention gradually turns back toward this silent source. Instead of chasing thoughts outward, awareness begins to rest in itself. And in that moment, something astonishing becomes clear. The ego cannot be found. Not because it has been destroyed, but because it was never there in the first place. This is the shocking revelation Maharshi pointed to again and again. The spiritual search is built upon a misunderstanding. The one who is trying to become free is itself only a thought. The one who is trying to destroy the ego is another appearance in consciousness. When this is seen clearly, the struggle ends naturally. What remains is not emptiness in a negative sense. What remains is the silent, boundless awareness in which all experiences arise. Maharshi called this the true self. It is not something you must create or achieve. It is what you have always been. And this is why his teaching feels so radical, because it reveals something that overturns the entire structure of the seeking mind. The ego you believed yourself to be was only an imagined center within the vast field of awareness. The moment this is seen clearly, the illusion dissolves effortlessly. And what remains is what Maharshi described as your true nature, silent, limitless, and eternally free.